Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you could please take your seats so we can begin the next session. Now, our next speaker has probably had the busiest year of his life. The African Continental Free Trade Area opened for business on January 1st of this year when trading officially started. And since then, the Secretary General of the AfCFTA has been the frontman for what is now the world's largest free trade area. It's connecting 1.3 billion people across 54 countries with a combined GDP of $3.4 billion. So as it approaches its first birthday, how is the AfCFTA doing? And what can it do for African businesses and partners in places like the UAE? Well, from the AfCFTA Secretariat in Accra, Ghana, I want you to give a warm Dubai welcome to His Excellency, AfCFTA Secretary General, Wamkele Mene. Now, I think we're having some problems hearing you there, but I think the audio is going to be sorted out. Can you say a few words, Your Excellency, so we can check to see if we can hear you?
Well, I was saying thank you very much for the invitation, and I regret that I'm not able to join you this morning, but I nonetheless look forward to a very, very good conversation. I hope the audio is better now.
I know that you are probably the busiest man I know, and you can't be in two places at once, but thank you for joining us, at least virtually. Now, I want to ask you first, the AfCFTA is a work in progress. It is launched, but there's still a lot of work for member states to do with regards to negotiations, for example. How's that going?
Well, it's going very well. We just met on Sunday. Ministers of Trade and Investment met to finalize the remainder of the work. We've concluded about 88% on rules of origin, that is to say the local content rules for the AfCFTA. And so the progress is going very, very well, even in the middle of a pandemic. I think we've done exceptionally well given the unprecedented challenges that we have been faced with, not only on the continent, but the world over. We now have 41 countries out of 55 that have ratified the agreement establishing the AfCFTA. And that signals to me that countries in Africa are committed and that our leaders are committed. In the segment before, President Tshisekedi, as the chairperson of the African Union, our leaders are committed. They are committed to reducing intra-Africa trade barriers, reducing intra-Africa investment barriers. That is why so many countries, 41, have ratified the agreement, have accepted the legal obligations to reduce barriers to trade. And so it's a very, very positive signal. And it's a realization that the only way that Africa can recover from this pandemic is on the back of boosting intra-Africa trade, and intra-Africa trade contributing to Africa's economic activity.
I know, yes, you're a big believer that the AfCFTA can help Africa shake off the after effects of COVID-19. In what ways will it do that, though? In what ways will it build resilience so that we can at least weather future crises?
What we've realized is that whilst it's important to be connected to global supply chains, there is a need for us in Africa to accelerate our own value chains and establish our own industrial capacity. We, as you may recall, 10 months ago, we were importing almost $15 billion worth of pharmaceutical products. We were importing all of the germ-killing products as well as the personal protection equipment that we needed to fight the pandemic. And in my travels over the last year, I've seen remarkable progress. I've seen in Senegal very, very positive steps towards production of medicines. I saw in Zimbabwe last week the production of oxygens. I saw in Malawi local production of sanitizers, and all of these things, and there are other examples that one can point to. But what all of these things require is an integrated approach to Africa's industrial development. That is the type of long-term self-sufficiency that we need without disconnecting completely from global supply chains. So this is the lesson that I believe we as Africans should learn from this pandemic in the context of implementation of the AfCFTA.
Now, what's less known about the AfCFTA is that the scope exceeds that of a traditional trade area. For example, it focuses on more than goods, trades in services, investment, intellectual property rights and competition policy, and even e-commerce. It's very broad, isn't it?
It's a very broad agreement, very comprehensive. The ambition for liberalization is very, very high, because we are coming from a much lower end. Intra-European trade is close to 70%, if not more. Intra-North America trade is close to 60%. Intra-Africa trade is at around 18%. So we're starting from a much lower base. That means that the trade agreement that we have must capture the entire economic activity of a country, and that's why, as you say, it's such a wide scope, including e-commerce, digital trade, investment, promotion and facilitation. All of these different facets of a country's economy are absolutely critical to boosting intra-Africa trade, and we are committed to making sure that even if we start with 10, 12, 15 countries, we are very committed to ensuring that we liberalize intra-Africa trade and we boost economic activity through this very, very comprehensive trade agreement.
It's interesting you talk about commitment there, because my next question, I guess, was about the challenges that you're facing to fully implement and successfully implement the AfCFTA, because countries can make commitments, but how do you get follow through? How do you make actions from words and from commitments that are on paper?
Well, the starting point is, of course, for countries to accept the legal commitments, the ratification. That has happened. We now have 41 countries who have ratified the agreement, which makes it the fastest instrument under the AfCFTA to be implemented. What we are seeing, and what I am seeing in my travels throughout the continent over the last year, is that Africans and African governments want to see and have a desire to see change on our continent, change for the better. We don't want to be known as the continent of poverty anymore. We don't want to be known as the continent of the future anymore. We want to be the continent of today, of investing today, doing business today. That is why our commitment is moving beyond just the agreement. We are working to establish value chains that will support productive activity in areas such as the auto sector, pharmaceuticals, agro-processing. These are very, very important beyond speak or beyond the trade agreement commitments that we are making to make sure that there is a productive sector investment. We are now in the last stages of undertaking a very comprehensive study on value chains development in Africa, and these value chains will attract investors. For example, in the automobile sector, which is a fast-growing sector on the African continent, as you know, the continent has the fastest growing middle class in the world, and so this should position us very well as a continent in respect of investment coming in from the auto sector. I mentioned earlier that in 2019, Africa imported $15 billion worth of pharmaceuticals. That too is an opportunity for us to see how we can boost productive capacity in the pharmaceutical sector on the African continent, which, as we all know, has the minerals, has the genetic resources that are required in the production of pharmaceuticals. But all of these things have to be anchored in a continental legal framework, and that's what the AfCFTA presents us with. It presents us with an opportunity to connect this market of 1.2 billion people with, in 2035, an estimated combined GDP, consumer spending, as well as business spending that will be close to 8 trillion United States dollars. And that means that proposition certainly is on the move, and in about 10 years' time, with a combined GDP of close to $8 trillion, I think is a very, very positive sign to investors that we are turning the page.
Secretary General, I want to talk about those investors. I'm here in a room at Expo 2020 with maybe 1,000, 1,200 investors and business leaders, many of them from the UAE. The question in everyone's mind, the first question is, what can the AfCFTA do for us, do for them?
This is in 2019. Of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 6 were in Africa. At that time, before the onset of the pandemic, the average African country was growing at about 3.5, almost 4% GDP per annum. That, to me, signals the future of this continent from an investment point of view. Yes, of course, there are challenges here and there, but in general, the investment proposition, even before the pandemic, the onset of the pandemic, the investment proposition was already there. Now, what we are doing is to leverage on this market of 1.2 billion people to create a single market, to create a single set of rules for trade, for investment, for e-commerce, for digital trade, all of the very, very important aspects of the global economy. We are integrating rules for investment and trading in Africa. You will now be in a position to come into one country on the African continent and invest in that country, and you will have access to all other countries based on the same rules for trade and for investment. This should reduce costs, the cost of doing business in Africa. It should make investors and investment on the African continent more efficient. And of course, it positions an investor for a continent that is fast growing, with the youngest population in the world. By 2050, the average age in Africa will be below 25. And as I mentioned earlier, with a growing middle class and an attendant growing purchasing power. And so we are, through this agreement, we are positioning ourselves for a very, very strong case for investors to think very, very seriously in a positive way about investing in our continent. It offers immense opportunities for growth. And I'm very encouraged at what we have been able to achieve so far in this agreement, even in the middle of a global pandemic.
When you go around, not just Africa, but around the world, we've had enough time for all serious investors, people who are serious about investing for the long term in Africa. I just think about this session I just did with the chairman, the group chairman and CEO of DP World, who made an announcement yesterday of a $1.7 billion investment in ports across Africa, a true commitment there. What's been the reaction to your offer? Because by now they understand what you've just said, but what has been from across the table, what are you getting from international investors?
Well, international investors want to see us Africans implementing this agreement, and of course we are committed to that. We are encouraging investors to make use of this agreement that opens up the entire African continent as an investment market. You mentioned the announcement that was just made 2 days ago. Also, Google made an announcement of a significant investment on digital capabilities on the African continent 2 weeks ago. So even in the middle of a pandemic, we are seeing global investors coming in and expressing a very strong interest, because they are now beginning to realize that this agreement offers investment opportunities. We have a major, one of the top 3 global auto manufacturers that are expressing an interest to establish value chains across the African continent. They want to shift their production structures for components from one part of the world to the African continent because of the competitiveness that we are offering through the AfCFTA. And so the response has been twofold: very, very positive, very encouraging on the one hand, and then of course on the other hand, some investors saying, well, realistically, we would like to wait 1 or 2 years to see really how committed Africa is to this agreement. But in general, it has been a very, very positive response.
And this is an opportunity not just to speak to the people in the room, but people around the world that are watching this Global Business Forum Africa, to tell investors what they need to do to connect with the AfCFTA. You've now got the Secretariat in Accra, Ghana, and I would encourage anyone that is in Ghana to please visit the new Secretariat. But what can the Secretariat do for them, and what should they be doing now to more closely align themselves with the AfCFTA and the opportunities of which you've articulated?
Our job as a Secretariat is to facilitate investment into all our member states. Primarily, that is and to assist member states implement their obligations under the agreement. We are taking concrete steps to do precisely that facilitation of investment. For example, early part of next year, by the end of the first quarter of next year, we will host an AfCFTA business forum. It's not going to be a talk show. We want to bring investors and match them to investment opportunities that this agreement is opening up. Whether it is in the pharmaceutical sector, in infrastructure development, we will target specific areas of investment and offer investors an opportunity to take a much closer look at what those opportunities, the investment opportunities that will be offered. And so this is an example, this business forum is an example of our role as a Secretariat, going beyond just making sure that the agreement is implemented, but to facilitate investment in productive sectors of Africa's economy, even in the services sector. If you are an investor and you are interested in investing in financial technology, in fintech, we will be able, at this AfCFTA Business Forum, we will be able to provide you, to map out where all of these opportunities are within AfCFTA member states. And of course, the big difference, a very, very positive difference, is that there's now a legal framework. There's a continental legal framework that will underpin all the investments that will be happening. We have a dispute settlement mechanism because, as we all know, in business and in trade, there may be disputes. And so we need to have a credible, competent mechanism and impartial mechanism for resolving any investment, trade, commercial dispute that arises. So in addition to providing the legal framework for investing, we're also providing a legal framework for resolution of any disputes that may arise. And this dispute settlement mechanism is going to be independent of the Secretariat, independent of any African country. It will function very much like the WTO or any international arbitration forum. And that's something that even our own investors African investors have been saying that they want to see a credible tribunal for resolution and arbitration of investment-related disputes. And so I would say to the audience, watch this space for next year in March, where we host the AfCFTA Business and Investment Forum. We will match opportunities for investment with your investment desires or prospects or market identification where you would want to see potentially opportunities for investing.
We'll take you up on that offer and we'll see you in Accra. That is the AfCFTA Secretary General Wamkele Mene. Please show your appreciation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Please remain seated. The program will continue.